our first recording of 2025. I am so excited for today's episode of Growth Powered by FareHarbor. Today, I have the wonderful Andrew Slaga. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm ready to get into it.
Oh, yes. And it is actually a topic I am so excited about. It's kind of a mystery to me, even as an employee of FareHarbor. And I know it's a mystery to a lot of tour operators in our FareHarbor community as well, which is exactly why I had Andrew on. So for today, our expert is Andrew Slaga of Solé Watersports and Marina Marathon. I had noticed he posted in the community a really excellent report on his returns of his things to do ad campaigns, and there was so much interest from other community members, other FareHarbor clients asking him so many questions. I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta get this guy on before he blows up. He's gonna be a celebrity in no time flat, so I gotta grab him before someone else does. So Andrew, thank you so much for being here. Could you tell us a little bit about you? I'd love a personal or maybe even professional fun fact about you, and then a little bit about the business you have on FareHarbor and even your side hustle diving into these things to do ad campaigns.
Yeah, so I guess to start, I'm red-green colorblind, and I have my captain's license. And so a little fun story about that, when I got my license back in 2020, when I was getting my physical, the doctor who was administering my physical was also a family friend of ours, and he's red-green colorblind. And so at first the nurse was showing me those awful dot tests. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because I can't see like 85% of those. And he came in there and he was kind of upset, and he brought in 3 folders, and they were red, green, and yellow. And he held them up and he was like, "Can you tell me what color this one is?" And it was like red, green, yellow. He was like, "All right, you're good." So that's how I got my license, being red, green, colorblind.
Well, thank God you can see blue, so you can see the water. And what about a little bit about your business? I'd love to know. I know that Jordan is your account manager. He was singing your praises prior to our recording. I'd love to hear a little bit about what you have on FareHarbor and, like I said, your side hustle on these Google Things to Do ads.
Absolutely. So, Solé Watersports is a family business, and I've become to be a large provider of a lot of services for our family business, but it was my mom who started it. Solé Watersports is located at Hawkscay Resort, which is the largest resort in the Florida Keys. And so essentially they kind of act as our one OTA, so to speak, and they also take a commission of all of our bookings as well. But a little bit about how I got into things to do, um, for any of our listeners that are familiar with the cutthroat market of Key West, that is probably considered like things to do land. All of the operators pretty much are on things to do, and I had noticed that a couple years ago, and that was something I just really wanted to figure out how to do. And first, I want to thank all of the people that I bugged in the connectivity department when I was first trying to do this. And I guess without them being patient with me, I might not be here today. But yeah,
That's amazing. And I like the shout out to the connectivity department because when I remember back when I was an account manager, when Google Things to Do first came out, it was really astounding. And I think I went to Arrival and there was a session about it when it was first kind of coming and being developed. And it was really just a hot topic around the tourism experience space. And at FareHarbor, we were like all hands down, where I was trying to help map connections to get as many of our clients on it as possible. And I was like, I remember being like, I'm doing all this and I'm still trying to fully understand like how pivotal and how important this is. So for someone who might not know a lot about Google Things to Do, could you kind of give an overview of what Google Things to Do kind of is, and why tour operators should care about it?
absolutely, I'd be happy to. So I think when FareHarbor first announced their integration with Google Things to Do, it would have been with what's called the operator booking module, right? So when you're looking at your Google Business profile and you see the little button that says prices, this is where you could have your activities displayed. And if you had the things to do integration with FareHarbor, these would be linked directly to the light frame. But outside of the operator booking module is where it gets really interesting. So there's two segments of things to do. There's the organic side and the sponsored ad side. So the organic side, as most people or some people have come to figure out, is labeled activities and tours in search in Google search results. And then the sponsored ad portion is labeled tickets and tours. Something interesting that Google has started doing recently is displaying what's called top experiences. When you Google, say, things to do in Miami, for example, or Miami activities, it's typically with the things to do and activities type searches, which are typically the biggest broad category search terms for a market. But below the sponsored things to do ad carousel, which would be tickets and tours, you'll have top attractions. Okay, and this would be any large attraction in an area, typically like brick and mortar type attractions. And then below that, you'll have top experiences. And it's my thought that this is powered by Google's AI. And if you're lucky and you have things to do listings that rank really well, these top experiences feature two things to do activities. And so if you can get your activities in there, it's a real good way to start scooping up um, things to do search volume, which is typically quite large for certain markets. And this is all free.
Yeah.
That's without being sponsored.
Yeah, yeah, there's no charge for Google Things to do to connect to it, no commission taken. And from what I've seen, like I said, I've watched a few presentations, and Google has said they don't plan on having any type of commission. So it is cool that there's this like free space in that sense to purchase as a consumer, that doesn't take any additional commission or anything from the operator, which I think is really interesting. How do you think, like, what do you think are the most misconceptions around Google Things to do? I know a lot of people had questions for you where they're like, I'm not seeing any bookings from Google Things to do. I'm not seeing a lot of value in this connection. And in addition to that, I think that people also want to rank, like you're saying, especially in those competitive spaces, higher, to be able to grab those Google Things to do commission free bookings in that space. What advice would you give them, and what are people probably getting wrong or even doing wrong before we even get into ads, just having your listing on Google Things to do?
First, I think an initial misconception, if you're not on Google Things to do, is that only OTAs are allowed to do it. And this was once the case, because when Google Things to do was released in beta by Google, only publicly shared companies were allowed to participate. And so the TripAdvisors, Viators of the world got their first stab at things to do. And largely it's uh, remained that way, and unless you're talking about a market like Key West and it's starting to pop up in other markets as well. Another misconception would be that if you are not structuring your things to do listing like an OTA, then you will likely not rank like an OTA. And so in order to play this game effectively, you have to properly use keywords in your things to do listings and name your activities sometimes in a different way than how you would privately name it on your site.
Do you have
So,
any, I don't mean to put you on the spot
no,
here,
you're
Andrew,
fine.
but do you have any example of that on how it would be different from website to a things to do listing?
Okay, yeah. So, say if you offer I don't know, like a tour to the sandbar, right? If you're in Florida. And so say if personally we call our sandbar tour the sandbar experience, right? But nobody's searching for a sandbar experience. Most people are searching for boat tours in the area, and so I named it like a sandbar boat tour. And then you attach the area or city, town, market, whatever's applicable in the search terms.
That's really smart. I've never thought of that. I've only been to Florida, I think, when I went to Disney World. So I definitely would have been one of those people where I'm just searching boat tour and seeing what sticks. So I think
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Did
Well,
you try anything before you started doing Google Things to Do and seeing such success in those returns? And we'll get into that strategy later. Did you try anything else that either works and you do it in conjunction with Things to Do, or things that just did not work at all that you're now steering clear from?
um, well, my knowledge has grown a lot since I first started this, but before Things to Do, pretty much the only other thing I was doing was were Google search ads, and I do think those effectively work in conjunction with Things to Do ads. Um, for example, I'll just use Florida as another model, but Sunset Cruise terms have started displaying organic things to do listings, and you don't have to attach the term tour in your search. So if you sponsored your site with a search ad for that search, you would also be listed in the organic things to do. Or another one I see is if you do like snorkeling tours, typically you'll get both the sponsored Google Things to Do carousel, the map pack with the 3 Google business profiles, and an organic Things to Do carousel. And so if you're sponsoring yourself in the tickets and tours, sponsored Things to Do, sponsoring your business profile, or already ranking highly in the map pack, and you're sponsoring a search result in that same search, and you have an organic Things to Do listing that's ranking well in the organic carousel, you're essentially giving someone like 4 chances to click on you for the same search. So
That's amazing, and that really goes into what I was going to ask you next. Was like, what are the biggest differences for someone who is super new into getting into digital ads and combining Google ads, Meta ads, now Things to Do ads? What are the distinctions between those, and how should your goals differentiate between those platforms?
I'd say the biggest distinction with Things to Do ads is you're not targeting keywords per se. So Google determines where these sponsored carousels are displayed, which search terms, and they're adding more and more search terms as time goes on. But that would be the biggest distinction. I would say that Things to Do ads and Things to Do listings are most similar to Google Shopping in that your product or tour feed, what you're giving to Google about the product is essentially how or how Google determines where it's going to be placed. Uh, and it can, if you structure it correctly, it can also allow you to pay less if you're sponsoring it, right? If what your activity is named is not as relevant as Google would like it to be, you're typically going to have to pay a little bit more money to sponsor it. And this applies to search ads as well.
Interesting. I really want to, if you don't mind, I'm going to read the post that went what I call FareHarbor viral, which is when our clients in the community really enjoy to post. So your post said, is anyone running Things to Do ads? If so, how are they doing? 10 times ROAs over the past 3 or so months. Can you kind of explain what we're seeing here and what strategy that you used that worked for your business to see these kinds of returns? I mean, the comments here are all like, I'd love to hear some tips from you. And are you running these yourself, or who is? And is it going to the FareHarbor URL, your own website URL? I'm not seeing anything on things to do ads. So people are really curious about this. They want to know the secret sauce. And frankly, I do too. So I'd love to hear your perspective.
Well, it is still largely a big unknown in the industry. So I guess to start, what you're seeing in the overlay is a 10 times ROAS, which stands for return on ad spend. And one thing I would say is important is you have a better chance of getting a larger ROAS if what you offer in your tours is, I'd almost say, popular in your area. This might be counterintuitive to some people, but the more widely known, the tour it is that you offer, even if you have competitors, that's fine. This would allow you to, I guess, show up more because there's a larger search volume for your tours. And also there's typically going to be a lot of carousels that you could show up in. Another thing I would say is, from what I've seen, it's important to have per person prices. Now, I'm sure it would work just fine if you were offering like private tours of some sort because you could afford to pay for more clicks and still have a solid return. Because when you're sponsoring ads, you pay for each click. But the sweet spot seems to be right around $100 or a little bit less per person. But if you offer, say like a scooter tour or something like that, that could be just as competitive. But you would have to convert a little bit more to achieve the same ROAS. And something else I'll also say is the competitiveness of your market will determine what you're paying in the carousel per click, right? So this can be another big factor. Like, for example, if you're in Hawaii, you could be paying potentially 5 times more per click than we are in Marathon, Florida. Um, Another thing I do is I have the things to do listings land on individual tour specific pages on our website as opposed to the light frame itself. And I do think that's important because it gives somebody a chance to navigate quickly to any other part of your site if they see fit. And something else I've started doing recently is suggesting other tours below the main one on that tour specific landing page. And this is something that FareHarbor does with their own websites as well. Um, but that's been very successful. And I've seen that, even if somebody clicks on, say, like a sandbar tour, they could be just suggested something else and end up purchasing that. So
Yeah, I like that thought there on having it go directly to an activity page rather than the light frame itself, especially as I keep screaming from the rooftop the importance of the FareHarbor light frame is obviously so important, but it's also so important to have your listings optimized with all the questions that someone's going to have answered just by looking at a general view of your listing. So I think it's like you said, our FareHarbor websites have that activity page, and we have that dialed in a way that I think is really optimized, eye-catching, and also built with SEO in mind. So I love that thought there. What I like about your approach, Andrew, to Google Things to Do, both as just having it integrated or connected rather, as well as from the ad standpoint and paying for these ads, is you seem to be very realistic in these expectations that operators should have. So I'd love to dive into that just a little bit more. What do you think operators should realistically expect when launching their first Google Things to Do campaign, whether it's just getting their listing up, but I'd also like to hear when they're first starting to get into their ads as well.
I guess the easiest answer is it depends. Not all websites are going to perform the same. And, the easiest example would be the structure of like a FareHarbor website. So if your things to do listings are having the user land on that tour specific landing page, it's important to have those short, detailed information tidbits up top. It's also good to have social proof. So if you can get like a review widget in there as well, that's really important up top. I wouldn't go text heavy up top. You know, you want somebody to quickly get the gist of what you're offering, see your reviews, see people that like it, see a good picture, um, and then go from there. And it's also important, I think, to easily be able to view the light frame from this tour specific landing page. So something that I've started doing recently, and I know FareHarbor does this with their websites too, is having like a, a sticky bottom button at the bottom of the screen that's, really, you don't have to struggle to reach it with your thumb, and it says check availability. Um, that would be something important to offer. So I guess in terms of realistic expectations for an operator, when you're setting up things to do, it can take about a week to see where you're going to end up ranking organically. Um, and depending on the structure of your tour specific landing pages, you can either have immediate great results, or you can kind of struggle to get those first initial conversions. But it's really up in the air. But generally, what I've seen is that it turns out to perform quite well.
That's awesome. Are there any other, I love that you're hitting the, how all of this is so connected. Like, make sure, I always compare these kinds of things to baking a cake, where it's like, okay, well, make sure you have your eggs and your flour, everything you need to actually bake a cake, and then let's get to your icing. We can't have any icing without having the cake. So I love the little plugs in here for make sure your website is optimized, your activity pages are optimized. How does your light frame look? Are there any other key optimizations you think operators should have in mind when they're getting started with Google Things to Do or with ads, or really even if they're just starting out and they're building their websites?
Well, I'd say a good practice would be to, if you're starting to build a website from scratch, just try to find a really good example of one that is working and try to model it. Um, I don't, there's no shame in doing a website yourself, but at least try to look at what's working in the industry. There's a lot of FareHarbor websites out there that you can look at, and you don't have to exactly replicate it, but it would be generally good to replicate that format.
As far as Google Things to Do goes and particular things to do ads, are there certain type of experiences that tend to perform better than others? I know you said it can greatly depend on where your operation is located, depending on the competition that you have around you. Does that kind of principle melt into the type of experience that someone could have, that it might not do as well as something else?
Well, I guess the first question that I would ask somebody is what you offer, relevant to your area? And most of the time that's going to be yes. But you can do some quick searches for things to do and then you insert whatever market you're in. You can see what's being offered in the sponsored carousels. You can also try a few different searches with what you offer and then input the word tours after it to see if there are any organic things to do carousels for what you offer. Um, that would generally be a good way to start. And then in terms of what performs best, like I kind of said earlier, per person activities tend to perform best, but I wouldn't see any issue in putting like a rental up there or like a private tour. Like I said, you could afford more clicks and still turn a good profit.
Oh, here's a question for you. We kind of touched on this a little earlier in the episode, but do you personally, when you're utilizing this strategy in your marketing with things to do ads, Do you put all of your offerings up there, or only particular activities?
Well, it depends. So it depends on what your budget is and kind of what performs best, right? So if you offer five different things, but kind of your bread and butter, maybe like two out of five, then I would start with two. And generally, I'd like to see a budget of at least like $7 to $10 per activity that you have, and that's per day if you're running sponsored ads. So,
Interesting. That directly relates to my next question, which was around budget. Of what kind of budget should operators expect to set aside for a successful campaign? And maybe even like what that looks like. Does it start with a little and you see something working and you pour more money into it? Or how does that exactly look? I know it's probably pretty contextual operator to operator, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
once again, it does depend, but yes, if you do start getting a good return, I would try to feed it more, because the one interesting thing about things to do is depending on, your market, sometimes the impression share is almost limitless. So for example, I'm helping somebody in Las Vegas right now, and if anybody can imagine the search volume for things to do in Las Vegas, it's absurd. And so if you're turning a profit with your ads, you keep feeding it with what it's making, and it sometimes it'll just go for the moon.
Yeah, and you said how long are we waiting to see if something is working? How long is that limbo of is this worth my time?
Well, I guess a good example right now is a personal one. So we just opened up another location about 15 minutes and into town.
Congrats.
Yeah, and that's in Marathon proper, right? So I swapped over all of my things to do links to land on this new website of mine, and that was about 5 days ago, and it's already doing about twice as good as the one that I posted in the group. So I'm actually seeing about a 20x ROAS right now. Um, yeah,
That's
so
amazing.
I improved the structure of the landing pages a good bit, and like I said, I have those other related or recommended tours at the bottom. So somebody who's on mobile and looks at one tour can easily navigate to another one. It's all about keeping somebody's attention when they're on their phone. I'm sure everybody here knows how easy it is to click on a Google shopping ad and then immediately X out of it. So that's essentially what you're trying to do with things to do is keep them on your website.
With that in mind, beyond Google Things to Do and Things to Do ads, how do you diversify your sales channels to drive bookings? So I know you touched on you have like an affiliate that is like your primary affiliate. I hear also that you're establishing a real presence in your community. So maybe grabbing who might be walking by or people who are at a local hotel, so maybe getting those walk-in bookings as well. What does that diversification of sales look like for you and your businesses, and what do you think is a healthy way to approach that mix?
Well, so the affiliate you mentioned is in this case a resort, and we're the only operator at that resort. And so this is typically more common in Florida. If you do like dock your vessel at a resort, you're going to have a chance to get those hotel guests onto your boat or your tour, depending on what you offer. But I don't just do ads. I focus heavily on SEO now too, and I'm starting to get into blog writing. But for, I guess, somebody that's just starting out, I would focus heavily on a multi-pronged approach, right? So we also have a lot of people on the ground that are heavily marketing with like rack cards and flyers, QR codes everywhere, and this works quite well in the Florida Keys. It may not work as well in other markets like large cities, but for us it works. So a combination of organic traffic, traffic from the hotel, recruiting restaurants and bars to refer people over to you. We're actually going to now start offering an affiliate commission to bartenders and servers and hotel guests. So that's another way that you can start to drive bookings.
That's so interesting. Back when I was an account manager, I had an operator who would recruit, like his son and his son's friends would run up and down in the beach with an iPad, and they would book rentals on it, and they'd be able. It was their summer job. It's how they afforded like their books at college, etc. And I thought that was so creative. What does that look like for you, getting those individual affiliates, those bartenders and hotel guests? How do you track that? Is it the QR code? How does that kind of look for you?
Um, well, if you're offering somebody an affiliate commission, obviously, or the accepted forms for affiliates in the FareHarbor community are you either get an affiliate link made and then you're responsible for paying that person if they produce a booking, or you can use the distribution network, or you can kind of track it yourself. So uh, we are actually tracking it through the online booking reference field in detailed FareHarbor reports. So, um, for example, all of these bartenders and servers will be landing on our website as opposed to a booking link. Um, and then we'll use what's called a referrer URL, and so we'll be able to track the purchases that way.
Is that like a UTM?
It's not a UTM, but it's similar, and it's something that FareHarbor uses a lot. Um,
Mm.
so
Awesome.
yeah.
Cool. I did run what FareHarbor calls like a channel mix report, and it let me know that your direct online sales are at about 68%. Your like walk-in bookings, your back-end sales were at about 23, and your affiliates made up the difference. I think that ratio is really healthy. I think that is a really huge testament to your success online. How does that breakdown kind of reflect to you the success of your marketing strategies?
Well, that current breakdown, I would say, is um, largely due to our affiliation with that said resort. But the real test is going to be breaking into the more competitive market of marathon. But I would say that ratio should be a goal, whether you have a resort referring you clientele or you're doing it organically. You should always try to strive for direct bookings to, through your website. That should be a goal for anyone.
Absolutely. And I wanted to dip in a little bit as we kind of round out the episode about tracking. So, again, I know success looks differently operator to operator. What do you look for when you're tracking the success of your organic listing, your organic traffic, your Google Ads traffic? What are you looking for that tells you that something is successful? And this can be as broad or as specific as you'd like to be. I just noticed in this comment section in the community, people were really interested in tracking and how you get these numbers. And sometimes people miss because Google Analytics is GA4 in particular. It's a real beast to take on. It's so contextual. If you miss one exclusion, if you miss one setting, your perception can be completely thrown off on what's working and what's not. So I'd love to hear maybe some principles you follow to make sure you're doing what's right for your business when it comes to your ad spend and how much time you're spending in each online marketing strategy you have.
Well, I guess the easiest answer in terms of ad spend would be I once again use a two-pronged approach. So in the instance of Google Things to Do ads and listings, I use these referrer URLs that I talked about, and I embed them not only in the ads campaign URL, but I also put them in the landing page URL for the things to do listings. And so I can see if somebody purchased through an organic listing or if it was a sponsored one, and I'll see what things to do listing it came from. And then I also utilize direct tracking in the light frame that results in seeing, from what I've seen, about 30% more conversions that you're accounting for, and 100% of them are um, attributed. So
Nice.
the combination of doing or seeing them in FareHarbor and in real time and feeding 100% of those conversions back into Google Ads is a very powerful one.
That's awesome. You seem really plugged in to the Google of it all, whether it's ads, whether it's things to do ads, things to do organic listings. With that in mind, since you're just so hip into the space, what do you foresee what's going to happen this year in 2025? Do you think there's going to be any shifts on how travelers are booking experiences? And if you do, how do you think operators should adjust their marketing strategies accordingly?
Well, I guess the best answer would be what Google wants you to do.
Yeah.
So Google is trying to scoop up as much of every market as possible. The best example would be car sales. That's another interesting model. So it used to be that most people would go to Auto Trader or Cars.com or something similar, Carvana. But now Google is offering dealers the chance to run something that looks just like things to do ads up in a sponsored carousel. So I think in terms of tour operators, there's going to be a big wave of people jumping on things to do in 2025. So it's best to be first in your market, is something I would say.
If you ain't first, you're last, I
That's right.
hear. I just have a couple more questions for you. You've touched on this a little bit, so I would love just a synopsis all in one place on how FareHarbor in particular has helped streamline your multi-channel sales approach, and how it's made it easier for you with things to do. I know you shouted out our connectivity team earlier. Is there any support ticket that our clients should be filing in order to get started with this or in order to enhance their connections, all that good stuff?
Well, I no longer use FareHarbor for my things to do integration, but I heavily use all of the tools that they give me in order to track all of the purchases and produce affiliates. Um, the only ticket I say that you would have to submit would be code that you would like to um, put in your dashboard if you're looking to implement direct tracking. That's the only ticket you'd have to submit. Everything else can be done outside of FareHarbor and within your dashboard yourself.
Amazing. Cool. And finally, what advice would you have for operators who rely too heavily on just one sales channel? Maybe they just are really into organic SEO. Maybe they're pouring everything they've got into meta ads. What advice would you have for them to diversify the way that they're getting found online?
Well, I guess I'll go with the most common example, which might be relying too heavily on OTAs. This can be a good method for starting your business, but I would try to bring the percentage of OTA bookings down over time um, by using things like SEO and paid search ads. Ads are a major component of how OTAs produce their bookings, and it's why they're constantly wanting to get a larger percentage out of you, so they can turn that profit. But if you can produce sales through Google Ads for a smaller percentage than an OTA would take, then you're winning, and you're beating them at their own game. Whether it's Get Your Guide or Viator, they're all running things to do in search ads. And so if you want to play the game just like an OTA, you can do that too. Um, I would say that I wouldn't rely heavily on just meta ads like you mentioned. because I think a lot of the intent in searches is found on Google. And so if you want the best chance at getting a really high return, you just bid on what's most applicable to your tours. But Meta, I'm not dissing Meta ads at all. I think they offer a great chance to retarget customers that have left your website. I don't have much experience or any experience at all running them in a broader sense. I think there's typically better ways to capture um, a broader audience than running broad ads on Meta. This might work better for, say, like a supplement brand or something of that sort, but if you're trying to target people that might be traveling to your location or are already in it, I would suggest targeting those direct searches on Google. So.
Absolutely. Andrew, you know your stuff. Sometimes I'm like, wow, am I just have the coolest job ever that I get to work with operators like you who are so multifaceted. And I think it's very apparent in this episode just how knowledgeable you are at this, not only just with Google things to do, but with online marketing in general. So as we close out the episode, I'd love for you to plug your businesses, whether someone wants to visit you out in Florida to your tour operation there, or if someone would like to utilize your services in launching things to do ads or talking a little bit about their online presence, how can they contact you?
Well, if you want to take a look at our businesses, you can go to solewatersports.com or just Google Solé Watersports or marinamarathon.com. We offer a whole host of activities out of the marina we now manage, whether it's from jet ski rentals or parasailing or snorkeling, sunset cruises, boat rentals, fishing. And then if you are interested in getting set up with something like Google Things to Do, I would be willing to set you up for free and run your ads free for a month, uh, outside of ad spend, of course. But you can email me at thingstodoads@gmail.com and we'll see if you're a good fit for Things to Do.
Perfect. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I'll be sure to include that contact information when I post this into our FareHarbor official community, which is on Facebook. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to like, subscribe, especially if you're watching on YouTube, which I certainly recommend, so you can see some visual examples of what Andrew talked about today. And leave a comment if you feel so inclined. Thank you all so much for listening. And I hope you have a really great 2025 and an even better day. See you all next time. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.